Chapter 11. The Comanches. When Thad came to his senses, he was lying on the ground outside the lodge of Yellow Cloud, bruised, sore, and dazed. It had not helped much when Talking Woman, wife of Buffalo Horn, came and kicked him in the ribs. In fact, that is what brought him to consciousness. "You bad, you go away," she scolded. "Where's Sleepwalk Girl?" Thad pretended he did not understand. She scolded for a while, kicked him several more times, then went away. In a minute or so, Little Rabbit took up where Talking Woman had left off. She screamed at Thad for 5 minutes without letting up. It did not matter much to Thad, for he was not afraid of her as long as she was only scolding. He only half understood what she was saying. She was so angry. He stood before her with what he supposed was a silly grin on his face. Yellow Cloud came and listened. Thad wondered what the chief had in mind to do with him, but when Little Rabbit had last run down, he merely grunted and walked away. Little Rabbit handed the water pails to Thad and yelled, "Get water!" As Thad limped toward the creek for water, Scar Pony walked along beside him, scolding some more. "Where my blackbird?" he repeated over and over. "Why you steal my horse?" Thad only grinned at the Indian boy. "I steal my horse," was all he would say. By the time they had reached the creek, Scar Pony's anger had spent itself, and he was challenging Thad to a friendly wrestling match. But Thad had no desire to enter into any of the games the Indian boys just then. All that day, Thad worked harder than ever before. Little Rabbit seemed determined to make him sorry for his attempt to return to his own folk. She had tried to make a good Comanche of him. However, the boy was pretty sure that the Indian's anger would not last long. He also felt sure that the feelings of the men, at least, was to some extent an admiration for his courage and spunk in attempting to escape. "Spider Boy Comanche, not Long Knife Boy," Little Rabbit said several times during the day, as though saying it would make it true. Thad tried to cover up the fact that he was tired, even though he was near exhaustion. He had found that the easiest way to get along with the Comanches was to obey cheerfully and to take their abuse without flinching. The next morning, when he was sent for wood, Thad went close to the camp of Warhawk's village. He hoped to run across Sally Buchanan. Sure enough, he found her gathering brush and buffalo chips. With her were several Comanche girls and a little white boy, a recent captive, besides her own grandchildren, Timmy and Tommy. She came toward Thad with a big grin on her face. "Well, Thad, I see you didn't make it." The boy was feeling pretty glum. All he could do was shake his head. Miss Sally patted him on the shoulder in a motherly way. "Don't you fret now, honey. You'll get your chance another time. I hear that Melissa got away. Where do you reckon she is by now?" "She's a far piece down the road, I bet," Thad boasted in his defeat. "She's riding my pony, Little Bit, and you know Little Bit has escaped from the Comanches before. Made it home every time, too." "Good for Little Bit, then," Miss Sally exclaimed. "I do admire a spunky creature, horse or man. The girl will get there all right." But Thad was not so sure. He wasn't even sure Miss Sally felt as certain as she pretended. "Do you think she will?" he asked. "Why, of course she'll make it, son," she said confidently. "She's got plenty to eat, and there's water along the way. Did she have a buffalo robe?" Thad nodded. "Then she'll make it home without a doubt." She changed the subject then. "We're starting to move tomorrow," she reminded. "I hear Yellow Cloud's braves will be heading for New Mexico. I reckon they'll take you along to help herd horses. I don't know when I'll see you again." Thad bade her goodbye and turned to go. But she called him back. "Now, Thad," she said, "I'm an old woman, and I may not live to take these young ones home to their people, but I don't aim for them to grow up Comanches. I'd like to hear you promise that when you do get home again, I am satisfied your prayers will be answered as to that. You will tell my sons where these boys are. Most likely they have torn up the country looking for us, but they don't even know we're alive. Will you promise you'll help them locate these little fellows, Thad?" "I sure will, Miss Sally," Thad promised, "but I don't reckon I'll need to. You'll most likely be home by the time I get there." "There's one more thing, Thad." Miss Sally was more serious than he had ever seen her. "This young one," she said, indicating the small captive boy, "all he can tell us is that his name is Willie. I can't for the life of me find out where he came from, and those red devils aren't about to tell me. If you can help me find his people, there will be one less white boy growing up to be a Comanche brave." Thad looked the little fellow over. The youngster clung to Miss Sally's ragged doeskin robe and looked up at him with big blue eyes. It would be a shame for him to never be found by his white folks. Thad promised to report the boy as soon as he ever reached home. "I reckon a woman of my age ought to be ashamed of herself if she hasn't got as much faith in the Lord's protection as the boys," said Miss Sally. Thad grinned. "I reckon the Lord's got a good reason to save you from the Comanches as he has for me. I'll see you at the Double Barrel Ranch next meeting time." Miss Sally whooped at him. Then she stuck out her bony, weathered hand. "Put her there, Thad. I'll see you then, and the little ones will be with me." As he walked away, Thad wondered how long it would be, but his confidence had been restored in talking to Miss Sally, and that helped a great deal. Warhawk gathered his people to take them north to the reservation. September had come, and he would make a leisurely passage, arriving in Indian territory before cold weather set in. He was sending a band of his braves with their squawks to drive his trade horse to New Mexico. They would accompany Yellow Cloud's young men and horses. A day or so later, Yellow Cloud gave orders as to who should accompany him on the journey westward. Little Rabbit would go, but Blue Flower remained behind with the baby. Thad would go, and he was also given Bullet to ride. He was to help in driving the band of horses. There were nearly 1,000 horses to sell, the result of summer's thievery. Thad was glad Little Bit was beyond their reach, for she might have also been sold, in spite of Scarponi's desires. The families with their goods, packed on traverses, pulled by horses, walked or rode a half-mile to windward of the herd. But Thad, riding alongside the horses, was often choked with the dust stirred up by the animals. He realized he was traveling farther and farther from his home. For days and weeks they journeyed toward the west and a little southwest. He was about as gloomy and hopeless as he'd ever been in his life, despite Scarponi's renewed friendliness. So hopeless did he feel that his mind could devise no plan for escape. He was becoming resigned to live with these people who, for all their savagery, had their good qualities too. They spent several weeks trading with the Comanches. Thad had heard of the Comanches all his life, and he had thought of them as strange outlanders, but he found most of them to be simple Mexican people. A scattering among them were renegade French, Spanish, American, and half-breeds. They lived in little abode houses, and their villages might have been taken for the ordinary settlements of Rio Grande Mexicans, had it not have been for their large warehouses and enormous corrals. Their entire business was trading with Indian tribes. They also traded with the Apaches, but most of their trading was with the Comanches. No questions were asked as to where the Indians had gotten their horses and equipment. Thad had heard that the Comanches were the real cause of the white settlers' troubles. He had heard Johnny Answorth say, "I do believe the government could bring the Comanches under control if they didn't have the bunch of traders to receive the stolen goods." Thad could see the sense in Mr. Johnny's statement. He saw hundreds of horses bartered to the Comanches for guns, ammunition, and beads, and handcrafted jewelry of turquoise and silver from Pueblos and the Navajos. No time was lost by the Comanches in depositing of the horses they had taken in trade, especially those that wore brands. These were sent immediately into Chihuahua or westward into the Apache Indians. After 2 weeks, Yellow Cloud had finished his trading, keeping only enough horses to mount his band and to carry the goods received in trade. They had packed camp and were on their way back toward their old location when a battle with some Mexicans briefly delayed them. Some of Yellow Cloud's braves and a few of Warhawk's double-dealing young Comanches had lingered behind the others and had stolen back some of the horses they had just sold to the Comanches. They drove them as fast as they could to join the herd of the traveling band. Yellow Cloud kept his scouts in the direction of Murata in the event the Mexicans should try to surprise his band. One day a scout came pounding into camp. "The Comanches come," he announced. "How many?" Yellow Cloud asked. "A large band," the scout answered, "all armed with carbines. Very angry, on good horses, they come fast." The camp was in turmoil. Yellow Cloud and his warriors arrayed themselves on their horses for battle. Faces and bodies were painted, striped with bright calico, red flannel ribbons, and the feathers were woven into horses' manes and tails. Yellow Cloud put on a string of beads, a large necklace of bear claws, and a man's gold watch on a heavy chain. Next, Thad saw him fasten around his neck a thin strip of rawhide, from which hung a cameo brooch. A letter M was worked in the design in the gold border. Thad had seen that lockout before. It had been Marcella Branson's. The boy had almost come to like old Yellow Cloud and resigned himself to adopting Comanche ways, but now he knew he could never look at him again without thinking of that cameo pin and what it meant. The braves rode to battle, not returning till the next morning. They had killed several of the Mexicans and also brought their own dead. Thad felt pretty bad about a prisoner they had brought now. The poor captive seemed half dead, but that did not arouse feelings of pity in the hearts of his captors, who promptly began to abuse him. After a while he heard the sound of many horses followed by an outcry from Yellow Cloud's people. The Mexicans were returning with reinforcements. The battle did not last long. The Mexicans had come to rescue their friend who had been taken in the previous battle. Thad found himself praying for the enemy's success. When at last the Comanches galloped away, they had the rescued prisoner with them. Thad was almost as happy about the outcome of the battle as he would have been over his own release from the Comanches. For a little while he even considered running away with the rescuers and throwing himself upon the mercy of the Mexicans, but that would only take him farther from his own home. Besides, he knew the sort of peril he faced with the Comanches. He did not know what might happen with the Comanches. It might only be exchanging a lesser peril for a greater. Continue listening.